So I'm an infrastructure and systems engineer, according to that. Just here in Sydney, we work on a very simple product. I think some of you put your hand up. It's called the Lotus Web Content Management. The problem with it is, like all other IBM software, is that we support a variety of environments, and those environments are very, very difficult to recreate. Not only for the customer, because the customer generally has a set amount of infrastructure from the hardware perspective and a set amount of infrastructure from the software perspective. So you have your dedicated databases, your dedicated LDAP servers, and your application servers. So for us, we support Linux, Windows, Solaris, every incarnation of Windows, several databases, several security servers. This is very difficult from a development and a test perspective, because in order for us to deliver our software to our customer, we have to replicate everything that they can possibly be deploying it on. We had, at the start of this, about 70 servers and a very, very small capacity from the memory and the actual CPU. Before undertaking this as the path to enlightenment, if we can, we had to consider two things, the technology and the people. So from the technology perspective, we have a very simple stack. We have the operating system, the database, security, and on top of that, our application layer. Now, let's take a simple example. We have Tux down here, and on top of him, we're going to put DB2, then Tivoli directory server, and WebSphere. And on top of that, we're going to put our software. We deploy this, we replicate it 1,000 times using EC2, the IBM software stack. But what's the problem with that? The problem is that each of those images is exactly the same. Each of those images is not only customized, but you then have to spend hours, days, making sure that you will recreate the customer environment, but also recreate the complete stack. So what happens when Bill comes along? Bill wants to deploy his own stack. Okay? So we have the customization of Windows Server. How many of you have ever customized Portal, customized WebSphere? Any of these enterprise software is a pain in them to actually work with. So this isn't the best example. Let's have a look. We want to simplify things a bit more. We are going to deploy 32-bit Windows 2003 server. Now, we support a couple of databases, so we have to make sure that we go and test against each of these. Now, how many of you here have a dedicated physical server for a database in your environment? Okay. How many of you have a dedicated physical server for an operating system? I'd expect everybody's hands up. Okay, so we have to support each of these just for Windows 2003. Now, we're only looking at the 32-bit infrastructure. What happens when we add another layer of complexity? Then we add the security. So each of these has to be replicated. Now, let's have a look. We have 18 different physical boxes that have to be available to us on demand just to test a single scenario. What happens when we need to test syndication, the replication of our data from one server to another? Well, quite simply, we're going to have to set up 2 of these. 3, 4, however many you actually need to test, however many scenarios you're going to be going through. Now, if we have to test Windows 2003 with DB295 and the Tivoli directory server on one instance and something completely different on another, we have to make sure that these environments are available 100% of the time. How do you do that with physical infrastructure? What people used to do is actually have, or rather attempt to have multi-tenancy on the same box. You would end up with multiple profiles of WebSphere Portal on the same box, multiple databases on the same box. I don't know of anybody that tried to install multiple operating systems on the same box, but you get the point. This is very, very difficult. So what do we do next? Well, we had a problem. We had multiple people trying to utilize a single physical box. So we hire an intern. He decides to go in and break everything. Without knowing, he just screwed up 5 to 10 people that all depended on that particular machine. What's another issue with this? If you have 4 to 5 people on each machine, you're waiting for the box to become available. Okay? So we have about 60 to 70 people in the office, and we have to replicate a couple of hundred of environments on a weekly basis. So management got together and came up with a solution. How many of you have a laptop? Okay. Us being a development lab, we have laptops. Everybody gets a laptop when you join IBM. It's a very nice perk. Then what happens is, as a development lab, you also get a desktop under your desk or on top, whichever way you prefer. Management solution is to go and purchase another one. That way you can test syndication. The problem with this is you then have to learn how to deploy Portal. Now, someone here just said that they spent, what was it, half a day to deploy Portal? Okay, so that's half a day gone. Then you have to configure DB2 or SQL Server. Now, you haven't chosen your operating system yet. Then you have to install all the fixes on top of it. So not the best solution. I'm not even talking about the ozone pollution as a result of this. So we got rid of that quickly. So the next consideration that we had to look at is the people. We had boundaries, and for us, this was a political issue. So we had multiple teams that each looked after their own technology. So we had a team from the development perspective that looked after their servers, and they had their own dedicated 5 machines, and you could never touch them, let alone walk past them and brush them. We had test and system verification testing. And then we had the coveted support. They had 2 boxes because our software never breaks. The problem with this is that when you actually go about customizing this hardware or looking after it or upgrading it, you have to look at it from each team's perspective. You have to update or you have to procure for each individual teams. When at the end of the year you have to purchase a box. So there's a slide I'll show you later on that I took from Anthony. When you have to purchase a couple of environments, you have to do it for your own team. You have to do it for just the development and just for the test. Nobody else benefits from this. So how do we go about fixing this? Well, we measure and adapt or guess and perish. One of the problems you will have is no matter what statistics you bring to management, they'll disagree. You measured it wrong, you measured the wrong thing. You didn't do it, you're lying. So one thing you have to remember is when you're measuring performance the idle time of hardware, you're measuring boxes, not live things. You're not measuring people's performance. And because there's underutilized hardware, it doesn't mean that people are not performing their job. So one of the instances was for the test team, there was apprehension because it was seen as, because the set of environments that were owned by test were on average utilized 3% of a 24-hour period. That was the utilization rate of the people that were hired. So what we did was we virtualized, to start with, some production environments. This was the busiest test environment. Its average utilization rate's 3%. We then took the next 2. So 3 of the busiest test servers that were used by our team internally had a utilization rate of 8% within a 24-hour period. We have the 345 boxes, which are 2 use, and basically every person or every team got a couple of those. These are the boxes. One of the problems was we wanted to achieve the true cloud, right? So we started with virtualization, which is, as you guys know, the underpinning of cloud. So in order for us to achieve this self-service, this ubiquity of on-demand computing, we had to have centralized storage. We didn't have it because budgetary constraints and so on, so we had to build our own. So what we did was we took some of the old servers, ripped all their drives out to make sure that we don't have I/O constraints, and put them into single boxes. We then created our own iSCSI LUNs. So we created our own IP storage with old boxes with their own hard drives and decommissioned the older hardware. So what we then were able to do is actually get rid of all the 345 boxes and put all the environments onto several blades. We had blades that were owned by the SVT team. Now, they were heavily underutilized most of the time as well, so we were able to decommission majority of our dedicated servers and slot them in virtualized onto the blades. Some of the blades these days within our lab run on average 40 to 50 environments. The rest of the blades that have high utilization, as you can see here, these are clusters of Portal. Now this is all dynamic. This is just a mere snapshot last night of our environment. Once the servers are no longer being utilized, they get consolidated onto several blades and they get powered down. So from a people per physical machine, we had 4 to 5 people per single 2-unit rack. Now we have the whole office can sit on a single blade, but then it depends on their workload as well. So we now have each person owning 3 to 4, in some cases up to 5, depending on how many customer issues they're working on, instances of Portal, WebSphere Portal, DB2, and completely and utterly customized.